I don't know about you, but before I started the Stranger Things finale, I was excited at the prospect of seeing the Mind Flayer returning the show and it being the big bad boss that we thought it was going to be following all of the previous encounters that we'd had with it over the past 10 years. However, when it was revealed that Slayer was actually the Mind Flayer when its form showed itself, I was utterly disappointed at what I saw. This wasn't the Mind Flayer as we knew it or had seen it before. This was a spider creature that merely resembled it. The Mind Flayer is this ungodly entity that lies within the abyss, a place so deep below the earth that an entire wormhole had to be formed for it to have access to Hawkins. Within the final season, we did learn more about it, but I just felt like the entity was tarnished slightly. So, I wanted to explain why the Mind Flayer looked like that, its origin, why it has all of these different forms, what the Duffer Brothers have said about it, and why it was defeated so easily. Plus, I also want to share with you how I would have handled the Mind Flayer. So let's get into it. Here is the Mind Flayer explained in Stranger Things Season 5. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers on the final season of Stranger Things. Why did the Mind Flayer look like that? When it came to the appearance of the Mind Flayer, up until the finale, we'd seen it in a couple of different forms. We saw it in the abyss when Henry was sent there in its shadow form when he tried to control it. We saw it take on a physical form within Season 3, when the group defeated it in the shopping mall. And we also saw it in its shadowy form hanging over the entirety of Hawkins in the early seasons of the show. This version of it is comfortably my favorite appearance that it had because it resembled nothing like we'd ever seen before, and it was more horror than fantasy. When looking at the finale, the Mind Flayer almost adopted this crustacean and spider form as it took on a form that we'd never seen have before. Don't get me wrong, it was huge and it was a monster that you'd most definitely never want to come up against, but this just wasn't the Mind Flayer in my opinion. The design of it just felt really confusing. Why did it have a massive hole inside of it that Vecna was able to treat as it's there? And I just don't feel like the threat of the Mind Flayer was ever the physical characteristics of it. I never once considered its mouth or its legs and its pointed feet. It was always about what it did to the mind of the people that it was near, and the fact that it could almost inject darkness within its subjects that were near it to put them under its control. It's all in the name, right? The Mind Flayer. It has been rumored that the lack of Demogorgons, dogs, and bats in the finale is because they were essentially drawn to the abyss to make up the form of the Mind Flayer right at the end. But I just think that's a bit of a weak answer. If the Flayer is made up of elements of the hive mind that run through the abyss and the upside down, surely it can't be harmed or killed because it's shadow form, and the particles would continue to reign after it leaves it. There's just too much confusion about why it has this physical form in the finale, and I think it's a shame. It operated much better as a shadow. Everything within the upside down of the abyss, from Demogorgons to Demodogs and Demobats, even Vecna, it had a unique look to it, and the Mind Flayer once had that. But in the finale, it just became something out of a monster movie or a fantasy film, and I thought it tarnished the characters slightly. It lost its godly element and just became a mere monster. Vecna's connection to the Mind Flayer. During the finale, we learned more about the Mind Flayer through Henry Creel's telepathic discussion with Will. It was said by Henry that the Mind Flayer didn't control him, and he didn't control the Mind Flayer, but instead they both needed each other to operate. Personally, I don't buy that in the slightest. As I've said, this is an ungodly, powerful creature, and an entity that rules an entire dimension, the abyss. It was there long before Henry Creel ever was, and it would have been there long after he was if the Mind Flayer wasn't defeated. Instead, I feel it showed how the Mind Flayer was essentially a manipulator, just like how Dr. Breener was to Eleven, and how Henry Creel's was essentially the weakest out of his Elevens and Wills. What could have comfortably ended up like Henry Creel, a vessel if his mind wasn't strong enough. And as we saw, Will was able to fight it off due to the support that he found in the togetherness that was at the heart of his friends. Henry Creel had nobody. So, the Mind Flayer's hold was something that was able to be strengthened because Henry felt a power with it like he'd never experienced before. It ultimately made him believe that he felt needed by the dark entity, when it never did need him. It just made Henry darker and used him as a transporter of that darkness to the right side up. When Henry was younger, he opened up the case and was transported to the abyss, which is where he originally got his powers. The Mind Flayer showed itself to Henry. the strength that he could have, and the darkness then started to plague his mind. This is why Henry and the Mind Flayer have always been deeply connected. Because ever since he was a boy, the Mind Flayer had essentially been manipulating Henry into doing evil things, such as killing his family, Patty, and even the Hawkins lab massacre. So, the deep-rooted connection is what bonded the two together for all those years. If it wasn't Henry, it would have simply just used somebody else. How Stranger Things ruined the Mind Flayer. Personally, I feel the show ruined the character because all of the mystery about its form, where it came from, and the true power that it had was eradicated in the finale. The group were able to essentially wipe out a god by using a flamethrower and a few weapons from the right side up in a matter of minutes. This was the creature that had been plaguing Hawkins for all of those years, had inflicted all of that wrongdoing onto characters, and was wiped out in a way that didn't require that much effort whatsoever. If I'm being honest, I'd say it actually felt more difficult for characters to take it out in Season 3 of the show. I don't think the showrunner should have ever made it this physical monster that could roar, eat, and smash. It was far better as this shadowy entity, where its biggest fear came from what it could do to your mind rather than it simply just standing on you. All of the threat levels were taken away because of that, and the Mind Flayer went from feeling like a god-tier villain, and a being that I was so excited to see back in the show, to something that was wiped out in the same way that the group would take down a Demogorgon. How I'd have handled the Mind Flayer. When it comes to the Mind Flayer, I have handled it completely differently. I'd have had Vecna gaining control over the Mind Flayer and essentially imprisoning it, something that it always wanted to do, and that would have taken place in Season 4, Episode 9 in this scene here. This would have allowed Vecna to be that god that he wanted to be, and the ruler of a world. Then from there in the finale, when the group were battling with Vecna, I'd have 11 be successful in killing him, not Joyce. And then that would be when the hold that Vecna had on the Mind Flayer would be released, and it would be free again, free in the realm that it governs. It wouldn't return in its physical form, but would hang over the group almost like what it did in this scene here, and it would be in its shadowy form. From there, it would then summon an army of Demogorgons, bats, and dogs, and they'd emerge in the ground of the abyss, and the group would then flee with the hopes of trapping it inside of the abyss. The Mind Flayer wouldn't be able to be killed. That's the point of this wicked entity. It is true darkness, and that's something that will always exist. Instead, it would forever be in the abyss trying to get darkness to spread to other worlds. And when the group would destroy the Upside Down, the gateway for the Mind Flayer would be shut off, and it would essentially be trapped there. So, it would be defeated in one sense, left waiting for somebody to find a way to make contact with it again. I do think it's a shame that the Mind Flayer was defeated in the way that it was, and that the big bad boss that essentially put darkness inside of Henry Creel was killed even before he was. The mystery of the Mind Flayer was something that was at the heart of Stranger Things, and I just simply thought it would be stronger than what it was. I almost didn't see the need to bring it back for it to be killed in the fashion that it was. It ruined the character, in my opinion, because the striking image of it hanging over Hawkins like a dark cloud essentially meant nothing. A flamethrower and a couple of other weapons is all it takes to fend off a god from another world. So there you have it. The Mind Flayer explained in Stranger Things Season 5. If you want to see more videos on Stranger Things Season 5, then check the playlist below and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Do you think the Mind Flayer should have been handled differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.